Thank you so much, Gina. I'm Antha Williams, and I'm head of environmental programs at Bloomberg Philanthropies. I'm here to introduce our next topic, which is transitioning to a clean energy economy. And following Gina's call for women's climate leadership, we have an incredible panel of 3 women who have really been leading the charge to move Europe beyond coal and the rest of the world as well. So here to join this panel today are Montserrat Roca, the Confederal Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation, Laurence Tubiana, the CEO of the European Climate Foundation, and the Right Honorable Claire Perry, Minister of State for Energy and Clean Growth. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laurence. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today. As Gina said, the topic of transitioning to a clean energy economy has never been more urgent. We just heard from the global scientific group, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that if we're going to avoid the worst, most catastrophic consequences of climate, we need to move off of coal just in the next 2 decades. And Minister, you have been instrumental in those efforts, both here in the UK, but globally through your Powering Past Coal Alliance. So I wonder if you could start with speaking to that effort.
Thank you, Antha. Thanks again for hosting us. So our decision to set up the Powering Past Coal Alliance, which I took with Catherine McKenna from Canada, who's another great woman in the climate space, was actually based on a series of things that happened. And I'm very aware that this is a challenge for many countries, both in terms of their energy mix, but also, as we'll talk about, in terms of the transition for workers. We, of course, went through a fairly painful transition with our own domestic coal production a few decades ago, not something to be recommended. But we have ended up in a place where coal, even 5 years ago, was 40% of our power generation. And we set out an ambition to get ourselves completely off coal by 2025. And we had a whole series of policy levers that delivered that. One was actually having a price for carbon, which we applied to our generation mix, which inevitably drove older coal plants off. But we also have had incredible success, particularly with our offshore wind industry, where we are now producing wind in the last auction that is as cost effective as buying new gas. And so we're up to about 32% in terms of renewable generation. We had our first coal-free days we've ever had last year. And it made us very confident that we could actually take out some of these experiences and try and encourage others around the world to make the same commitment. And Catherine and I thought this up over a cup of coffee at Climate Week, thought we might get about 10 countries. I think we're up to over 70 members now, countries, states, cities, utilities, everyone saying we understand that, if there's one thing we need to do in our energy mix, it is to try and power past coal and look to a lower carbon and a renewable mix.
That's amazing, and I think it speaks to your commitment on these issues that you're able to join us today amid a few other things going on.
Well, one of the reasons I hear is the Prime Minister who put me in her cabinet is absolutely committed to this agenda and also to helping other countries with this agenda. So I feel it's almost an act of solidarity to be here today as well.
That's great, thank you. Well, Montserrat, I'd like to turn to you because in your role, you represent 50 million workers. And I wonder what brings you to climate change. Why do you work on these issues on their behalf?
The trade union movement and me, especially leading the dossier on just transition and sustainable development and climate and energy policies, we have been from long working to put together what supposes the fight to have a good climate change and to put together with the respect of the workers' rights and to avoid that in this new industrial revolution that we were talking with the minister before, we have the minimum damage and the minimum losses. And it's for that reason that we have promoted this Silesia Declaration, this just transition and solidarity Silesia Declaration, that the aim is to put on the center people and to to provide them solutions and to avoid that no one is left behind, because in this transformation, sectors, regions will be profoundly reshaped. And we need to anticipate. This is our work, to call the governments, to ask the governments, to ask the employers also, because we work with the employers, that we need to be, to anticipate, to provide solutions, because when you speak with the miners or when you speak with the car builders, they want to know what will happen the day after, and how this Europe that protects, because I represent the workers of Europe. We are working with Sharon Barrows on a global level in this fight, and they want to know which future they can expect. Of course, we as the trade unions and we represent the workers, we say your life will be more healthy because you will have a more clean air, but what they expect is solutions for jobs. And of course, what we are trying to say is that our slogan in Paris was there are no jobs in a dead planet, but we want quality jobs. And we want that this decarbonization process is not done at the expenses of the workers. And for us, we have a good tool that is the social dialogue with the employers, with the governments. And in Poland, we have been fighting to have the maximum number of countries or states that they endorse and they support the Silesia Declaration. Because for us, it's a symbolic declaration. Of course, next we will ask for the work plan to implement this Silesia Declaration. But we think that the role also of the investors will be crucial in this, to implement this declaration, because they have a role to play in not only the public investors, also the public investment, also the private investors. And we are working very hard with universities and with scientists and to try to attract also them to this just transition. You must know that in Paris, Laurence knows perfect, we have been fighting to include just transition, that for us means a complex amount of things, means protection of the trade union rights, women's rights, gender equality, the right of the indigenous. There is all the social dimension. And we welcome that, for example, this time the Commission at European level, when they launched last week the strategy on the reduction of green gas, they include the social dimension. It was our fight. We have been fighting for a year to include this social dimension, because it's an umbrella of legislative initiatives. And of course, we need to tell the governments what is expecting the real world. The real world is expecting more ambition, and the urgency is to do now. Because now, next year, we will have the countries that they will need to present the progress with the national plans. We are preparing our members also to make contributions. And we have developed a project to prepare them.
Right.
Of course, will be people that will not be happy with what happens, but we are trying to attract the maximum people to our just transition as the solution to have more solidarity in this fight.
That's great. Well, that's very rich. There's a lot to say there. And Minister Perry was speaking about, just in the UK, the more than 400,000 clean energy jobs. So that's a rich topic. I want to turn to you, though, Laurence, because I know you have a bird's eye view on this from your perch at the European Climate Foundation, supporting both the environmental groups that are campaigning, but also the allies in health and other sectors. But rewinding the clock, before that, you were you were a key architect of the Paris Agreement, and so I wonder, you are just coming in from Poland. You're getting ready to go. How do you think we're faring on the path to the Paris Agreement?
I was thinking, and thank you, Antha, I was thinking when sitting and listening, yes, 3 years ago, we were just exploding with joy, no? With this incredible effort, the framework, and every nation, civil society, business, investor supporting Paris Agreement. So again, it's a big memory. It's still there. So even if we had Trump deciding the withdrawal, some not good noises from Brazil or Australia, what is really evident is solidity. The Paris Agreement was built for flexibility because we knew that there will be highs and lows in the political sphere. Okay, so but I look at G20 declaration, and I'm sure Saturday, maybe Sunday morning, well, hopefully by Saturday, we will be finished what is a framework which will be there to stay. And this embedded flexibility for countries to go faster or slower, depending on, of course, of the circumstances. But the framework will be there. I'm confident of that. And it has proved solid and resilient. Now, of course, is the moment of the society to come in. Because again, it cannot be a sort of a top-down thing. It cannot be government only. But now, and again, I was in Katowice, I think 40,000 people coming. And it's really a small town in Silesia. And people were coming for the COP, which is not the sort of the more evident one, because of course Paris was more like, this is the moment of the agreement. And you see now that people, the young people, the labor union, the business, fashion, Stella McCartney was there. Everybody is saying we need to do that together. So of course I'm concerned about the backlash and the pushback from incumbents, vested interest, and of course governments that take climate change as a political issue, again saying, in a way, taking this in hostage. And it's really far right in some cases, saying climate is against people. And of course, the big demonstration we have to do in the next years is climate change action is not against people, it's for people. And that, I think, the main challenge we have. I could give the details on this and that, but the more important thing is to have people designing their own future and seeing that the low carbon future is a good future. What exactly Montserrat and Claire were saying. So it's a very big challenge because that's not the way the international scene works. You are doing diplomacy in closed doors or open doors with government, but that's no more the case. We have really to change the way, like in a way, we have probably to change the way we do politics as well. So we have to have people involved, supporting, and accompanying and supported through, well, this evolution. So it's a big moment. It's a big moment of truth for Paris Agreement. One, finalize it, then really implementing it and accelerating action. So we should look at the result Saturday, how much this combination of we know what the rules are, but we know where the ambition is, and by 2020 come back with better contribution of countries, better commitments, and really making sure that the whole nice commitments have been said and presented are now translated into reality. And that is a surveillance of the monitoring of everyone to make people accountable of what they have promised. That would be really the reality of the next battle for the next 2 years, really.
One of the ways that Mike Bloomberg has engaged in the climate fight, of course, is partnering with the European Climate Foundation on the Europe Beyond Coal effort, in part because it's been so tangible. You know, since the campaign was launched in 2016, there's been a coal plant per month that's closing down and protecting public health and transitioning to clean energy. And as part of that, we've partnered with you and with the Powering Past Coal Alliance. And I'm just wondering if leaving for Poland tomorrow and reflecting on where you are here in the UK and what's needed, what your reflections are.
Well, I mean, the points I think about workers' transitions and also the ambition for the future is absolutely incredible. I've got a big Green Union Jack. We had a thing called Green Great Britain Week a few weeks ago, which is our first ever attempt in the UK to kind of celebrate what we've done, because we have actually decarbonised faster per unit of GDP than any other country, but also to challenge ourselves, because in a way the hard stuff lies ahead. And we did some surveying of millennials as to where they wanted to work, and 70% of them said they wanted a green-collar job. They also didn't know how many jobs were out there. And as I mentioned, we've already got over 400,000 green-collar jobs, which is a bigger sector for the UK than aerospace, which we hear about a lot. And crucially, they're happening in parts of the country that have been completely left behind for the last 100 years. They're happening in coastal towns. They're happening, you know, in places like Hull and Grimsby and Great Yarmouth and Cornwall. They're not happening in the affluent southeast because that's where the resources are, and it's obviously much easier to locate and operate a low carbon business there. So for me, the points about politics are incredibly well made. We have a Climate Change Act in the UK. I have 5-year carbon budgets that I have to try and meet and stand up and justify whether I think we're on track or not. That's a really good way of getting us through the ups and downs of the political cycle. But for me, the three things that I think are so important, one is coal. And obviously we are in a good position of having gone through the painful transitions. I'm married to a coal miner's son. I know how tough it was. But equally, for me, the transition to electric vehicles is massively important. And what can we do to facilitate that together? And the final, or two other areas, one is land use and forestation, which we talk about a lot, but we just need to accelerate because it's the lowest cost way of decarbonisation. And finally, as we did in Edinburgh a couple of weeks ago, accelerating carbon capture, usage and storage, not just for the energy generation where it's historically been placed, but actually trying to use that to decarbonise industrial clusters. And I'm going to be hopefully saying some more about that. But what I'm sensing though is I mean, I was around in 2015, I didn't have this wonderful job, is there is no pullback. If anything, there's an acceleration towards these goals from people, from the average people in the street. When we had the IPCC report, people were getting in touch saying, my granny and grandpa debated this report all day on a Sunday. That's pretty amazing. I think there is an awakening of the concern, of the need, and also from the justness point of view, and if you're looking at our Millennium Development Goals, well, I looked at them this week, 15 of them are impacted by climate change, our success or failure. So it's starting to weave together into a story not just of transition and just transitions for the Northern Hemisphere, but also for the most vulnerable people in the world. And I think that message is really starting to get through. So I'm optimistic. I'm not over ambitious. I'm just optimistic about doing this. And I recognize it's a challenge, but it's amazing to have this event and to have so many people committed to this change.
That's wonderful. Well, that is a very optimistic and good note to end us on. So thank you so much to our panel. It's a quick conversation, but thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laurence. Thank you, Montserrat. As became clear, the climate change timelines are getting faster than ever. And to Gina's point, at mid-century, her grandchild will be a not very old person. My oldest daughter will be younger than I am now, and so the time to act is now. It has been an incredible and inspiring climate exchange. Thanks to you all for being here, and to all of our panelists.